Hello and welcome to Jewish World Weekly on I-24 News. I'm Emily Francis. Each week, we focus on stories, issues, and personalities of Jewish interest here in Israel and throughout the diaspora, the global Jewish community. And we start with our top 5 items in the Jewish world, presented by Nicole Zedek. Nicole.
Thanks, Emily. Here are the top 5 items in the Jewish world this week. A lawsuit in D.C. was filed against Joe Biden's administration for a, quote, unconstitutional sanctioning of American Israeli settlers. Levi Yitzhak Pilant and Issachar Man had their assets frozen after the Biden administration accused them of undermining peace, security, and stability in the West Bank, including leading settler attacks on Palestinians. The lawsuit claims they are being targeted for being Jews who are living on Jewish land. A Columbia University professor claims she was fired due to her pro-Palestinian views. Law professor Catherine Frank was found by an internal investigation to have incited discrimination against Israeli students who were suspended during the pro-Palestinian campus protests back in May. The university confirmed that Frank had, quote, accelerated her planned retirement. A pro-Palestinian rally in London is attempting to defy police restrictions by marching past a synagogue. The Metropolitan Police placed restrictions on the march, which is set to finish at the BBC headquarters, because Jewish leaders and lawmakers raised concerns about the safety of congregants. Talks with the leaders of the rally failed as they refused to change their route. One of Syria's last remaining Jews has died at the age of 92. The Chief Rabbi of Syria announced that Hadia Sita passed away, leaving only 8 Jews in a country that used to have one of the largest Jewish populations in the world. May her memory be a blessing. And finally, an Israeli aid organization has called on diaspora Jews to help rebuild Israel's northern communities. The One Heart organization says, well, they've already mobilized 5,000 people to help restore the communities that were targeted and evacuated during the Israel-Hezbollah war. They are looking for 10,000 more to help the thousands of displaced Israelis return home. Now, those are your top 5 items in the Jewish world this week. Back to you, Emily.
The death toll continues to rise in the ongoing wildfires ripping through several Los Angeles neighborhoods. Authorities say dozens have been killed and many more are still missing. Despite heroic, unrelenting efforts by firefighters, heavy winds are expected, with fears mounting that the flames could once again wreak havoc in more neighborhoods. Fire authorities say over 40,000 acres have already burned in the blazes and are still not contained. The sleepy community of Pacific Palisades has been utterly destroyed by these fires, leaving thousands of families homeless, including the rabbis of Pacific Palisades Kehillat Israel synagogue. Joining us now from Pacific Palisades is Rabbi Amy Bernstein, the senior rabbi of Kehillat Israel in Pacific Palisades. First of all, thank you for being here, and I'm sorry it has to be under such a dire and tragic circumstances, and I want to personally send my respect for the fact that you yourself, being the leader of a Jewish community and also being the victim of losing your own home, I cannot imagine the waves of emotions you're feeling.
Yeah, there's a lot going on, obviously, ranging from incredible gratitude to be here. We're the Jewish people. We know that life is the most important thing. So to be here at all is, I'm grateful, and holding at the same time the incredibly hard, awful, devastating, existential loss of everything that was testimony to my past, to my parents' pasts, to my own history that I was going to have to give to my daughter, so that she had things, touchstones back to those generations and to those stories, and that's all gone. So it's
wow,
it's gratitude to pain, pretty quickly.
Well, and not only having that kind of pain, but it's still ongoing. The nightmare is still ongoing. The fire is still not out. and you have a community of also people that are technically homeless, and you don't have a synagogue yet to go back to, but we did see the images that was sent by Cantor Frankel of your being allowed into the synagogue, and the, I guess, the surprise and the miraculous fact that the synagogue is still standing. I imagine that just added to the emotion, but this time a little bit different than your home, huh?
Yeah, it did. It was very emotional to go there. We got a pass, through Jacob Sobroff at the, with his press pass, we were able to enter the synagogue, and there's just no words for, the incredible, overwhelming feeling that that home, our home, is still standing, because everything else for many of us is gone. So to see that KI was standing when so much around it was burned to the ground was an incredible feeling of safety in this catastrophe where nothing was safe. Remains in so many ways.
It really is a miracle in so many ways, but at the same time, you also, you were saying before when we spoke, I mean, there were windows open, you came to a lot of debris and soot, and that's, even more impactful knowing that it's coming from homes of people that you know and yourself.
Yeah. So that soot, those ashes on the floor of the synagogue is the life of our community in terms of everything that we had and had built, many of us over a lifetime. And to see that on the floor was profound. And this is the story of the Jewish people. Like that is not lost on me, that this is the story of the Jewish people for 3,000 years, is that it burns to the ground and we somehow clean it up and start again. And that's what we do over and over and over and over again. And we're going to have to do it this time too. And we will. That is who we are. Resiliency is baked into who we are. It's hard. The Jewish people has never shied away from saying how hard the work is to rebuild and how hard it is to maintain energy and hope and, motivation and all of those things. But we also are a people who just digs deep when we have to, and we do it. We rebuild. And as my colleague, Ed Feinstein, said so beautifully in a talk a few years ago, we are the 10th of Av Jews, the Jews who rebuild after the 9th of Av, start on the 10th of Av.
Yep.
And that's what we're doing. We're already starting to figure out how to be together in this, how to build momentum and some kind of forward energy, because it's going to take so much work. But the work has begun. This is the 10th of Av.
Wow, it's just, it's a very interesting analogy that you're making. And then also the 10th of Av, then you have the 14th of Av, and you have Tu B'Av. I guess this is also part of the journey of the Jewish people. Every holiday, we're depressed, we're happy, we're depressed, we don't eat. I mean, this is also in a way where comedy started as well, back in the days of the Borscht Belt and beyond. There's just something about the spirit that's just part of the glow of what we have done over so many years. So talk about that community and how those that have lost their homes and the fact you have this central location will provide a sanctuary during this time of grief and mourning.
We came through COVID living in lots of different places and somehow holding together as a community. So that really did tell me it's possible to stay together as a community, even though we can't be together, all of us together in the same room when we want to be. So we have technologies from COVID that are going to help. That are going to help us be able to stay together. So when we had the service Friday night at Sinai Temple, even though there was over 250 of us in the room, there were way more online. And so, people now, we have the technology in place to allow people to join us from wherever they are. Yeah. And we're going to need that. And I think without the structure of KI standing, I don't know, but what I know is we have something to show people to say, we're coming back and we'll have a place to be together again. The place that we've celebrated and mourned so many times on so many occasions, we'll have it again. So that symbol is really important, I think, for people to believe it's possible for us to rebuild.
Wow, beautiful. Thank you so much, Rabbi Bernstein, for joining us, given that you're right in the thick of it and taking care of so many people. And we're sending you endless love and prayers for getting through this challenging time.
Thank you so much. And thank you, all of you who have expressed your care and concern for us. It makes us aware that we are part of a people. Then truly we are part of a people. People are reaching out from everywhere. And there's something so moving and so comforting about that. So thank you all for your care and wanting to hear from us.
Commemorations were held in Paris on January 9th to mark the 10-year anniversary of the Hypercacher attack in Paris, in which an ISIS-affiliated terrorist sieged a kosher supermarket, killing 4 people inside. This was the deadliest terror attack against Jews in France since 1982. And now, 10 years later, the anti-Semitic threat in France is not going away. Here's more from I-24 News correspondent Joe Brown.
As the French public marks the anniversary of the January 2015 terror attacks at the offices of satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo and at a kosher supermarket 2 days later, the prevalence of anti-Semitism in today's French society is impossible to ignore.
Who would have thought 10 years on that there would have been such an upsurge in anti-Semitic acts in France? Since the 7th of October 2023, there has been a more than threefold increase in anti-Semitic incidents. I would also like to say to those listening to us that our Jewish compatriots represent less than 1% of the French population, yet they are the victims of 57% of racist, anti-religious, and anti-Semitic acts. 1% on the one hand, 57% on the other.
On January the 9th, 2015, Malian-born French immigrant Ahmed Al-Sharaa entered the Hypercacher supermarket in France, having just killed a police officer the day before. In his 4-hour-long siege, he killed 4 people and held another 15 hostage before police entered and killed him. He said it was in response to France's actions in the Middle East, and during the siege, he demanded that the perpetrators of the Charlie Hebdo attacks remain unharmed. But despite the largest anti-Semitic attack in France in over 30 years, the sentiment in the country is that things have not changed.
What happened here 10 years ago had causes that have not been resolved. We may have overcome the jihadist episode 10 years ago, but we know that Islamism is still on the rise in our country, that it continues to pose a daily threat to French people and to French Jews in particular.
A recent poll by French magazine Le Point shows that 1 in 5 young French people think that the Jews should leave the country, while 16% of total respondents said that Jews are to blame for the rising anti-Semitism in France. And anti-Semitic incidents are, indeed, rising. In the aftermath of the October 7th attacks, 2023 saw the highest number of anti-Semitic attacks recorded in France, with multiple incidents in 2024 suggesting that that unfortunate record could be broken.
The anti-Semitic tsunami of hatred for Israel and the Jews that we have been experiencing since October 2023 reminds us that what happened 10 years ago is obviously engraved in the collective memory, in the flesh of our country, but compels us not only to commemorate, but to fight against this hatred, against Islamism, and against all those who attack the values of the Republic and of France.
Aliyah applications from France increased threefold in the 12 months following October the 7th. So whilst the French public mourns alongside them, the 3rd largest Jewish community in the world is keeping a firm eye on its future.
Global anti-Semitism is reaching a fever pitch around the world, and a new Anti-Defamation League poll reveals that nearly half of adults worldwide hold elevated levels of anti-Semitic beliefs and attitudes, which is an estimated 2.2 billion people when the world Jewish population is only 16 million. Joining us via Zoom from the U.S. is Marina Rosenberg, Senior Vice President of International Affairs at the Anti-Defamation League and former Ambassador of Israel to Chile. Thank you very much for being here. Sorry it has to be under these circumstances.
Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah.
And indeed, I wish we had some better news.
This is nothing surprising. We know the rising tide of anti-Semitic violence behavior has, just been making headlines since the October 7th massacre and, of course, the over year-long war. But the fact that 46% of adults in the world hold these beliefs is quite alarming.
Yes, indeed. It's alarming and not surprisingly, exactly as you said. We've been seeing the number of anti-Semitic incidents going up, especially post-October 7th. And it's not surprising, to me at least, that the number of people that are harboring anti-Semitic attitudes is also on the rise. And basically what we're seeing here is a global emergency of anti-Semitism. We're seeing it from the Middle East to Europe, from North America to Africa, and it can come from anyone and anywhere.
Yeah, also given Jews, let's just think about it. In the world, Jews only represent 0.2% of the population. So how does the research of the ADL explain this ongoing escalation and problem, that we know of has existed for thousands of years? I mean, such a small minority, yet the majority is continuing to call for a lot of bad things to happen to the Jewish people.
Yes, indeed. So there are a few explanations to what is going on in this tsunami of hate and anti-Semitism. So first of all, the post-October 7th, we have been seeing a rise in anti-Semitism in a very alarming way. And this is not just since Israel entered Gaza, but this was immediately post the atrocities of Hamas in Israel. We've seen it here in the US, we've seen it in Europe, and of course in the Middle East and other regions. Secondly, social media. ADL's Global 100 was launched 10 years ago in 2014. And back then, social media was not as prevalent as it is today. And today, though it's a very helpful tool, it's also a helpful tool for the haters and the anti-Semites, and it emboldens them to share publicly their anti-Semitic views. And thirdly, what we call is the Al Jazeera effect in press and media around the world, where channels like Al Jazeera, but also Iran-backed channels like Press TV in Europe and Hispan TV in Latin America spread intentionally disinformation and anti-Semitic and anti-Zionist tropes against Jews and against Israel. And one important thing that comes from this survey that we just did at the end of 2024, 10 years after we launched it, is that the younger generation, the 18 till 34-year-old, harbor more elevated level of anti-Semitic attitudes. And basically what we're seeing around the world is a demographic time.
Yeah, and that is what is really so scary. I mean, we've seen it unfold before our very eyes on campuses, encampments, anti-Israel, pro-Palestinian marches. And the fact is that young people, because of social media, are also impressionable, don't have the experience of, listening to your sources, trying to see if it's true or not. How do you stabilize this out of control wildfire? I mean, what could actually be done, if anything?
Well, there's some good news coming out of this Global 100 survey, and it's that the majority of the adult population in the world, 57%, think that anti-Jewish hate is a major problem in the world. And why is it important? Because this means that governments and international organizations should take this support of the majority and take concrete, innovative actions against anti-Semitism. And this is why ADL calls for a whole-of-society approach in fighting anti-Semitism, not just the governments, but academia, civil society, the private sector, and everybody in the general public should stand against anti-Semitism and innovate with new concrete steps against it.
Wow, thank you very much for your comprehensive summary of this situation. I'm Marina Rosenberg, Senior Vice President of International Affairs at the Anti-Defamation League. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
With a rich Jewish history in Syria dating back centuries and one of the oldest synagogues in the world in ruins, the rabbi of the Syrian Jewish community of Israel is taking matters into his own hands to breathe new life into the over 2,000-year-old Jobar synagogue. The son of Syria's last chief rabbi and the current chief rabbi of the Syrian community, Rabbi Binyamin Hamra, has penned a letter to Syria's new leader, Ahmed Al-Sharaa, urging him to preserve the country's rich Jewish history. And we are happy now to be joined via Zoom by Rabbi Hamra. First of all, thank you for being here. And tell us more about your father's time as chief rabbi in Syria from 1976 to 1994. What was his experience there at that time before he left?
First of all, nice to meet you. I'm happy to be with you. My father, may he rest in peace, was the chief rabbi from 1976 to 1994. Before that, in 1972, he was an assisting rabbi to the chief rabbi who served before him. And from age 16, he was a teacher in a Torah school. And then from age 18, the principal. And so slowly he progressed. In the period of my father, he always told us that life in Syria was very enjoyable. It was permitted to practice Judaism, the synagogues, and all of our traditions and customs. It was possible to do so. Under Syrian law, it was permitted for each religion, Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, to practice its customs, and so we did. We observed the Sabbath, and the holidays were special. But at the same time, there was also great complexity and difficulty, because we were frightened, perhaps to do or say something that could, God forbid, harm us, despite never having any ill intent towards anyone. That's how life was. On the one hand, great fear. On the other, a really good atmosphere. That's how we grew up. In those periods, there were limitations. From the 1970s, you couldn't go more than 3 kilometers from the Jewish quarter, called Harat al-Yahud, but slowly the restrictions eased. They eased restrictions on women who wanted to get married. For that end, you could send them to America. And so it progressed, slowly, until 1992, when my father received from Hafez el-Assad permission that all Jews in Syria, be they in Damascus, Aleppo, or Qamishli, could go all over the world, but not, of course, to Israel.
What would be, you did write a letter to Syria's new leader, Ahmed Al-Sharaa. You mentioned that toppling Assad, a historic move due to God's providence. What would be ideal for him to do, not only for the Jewish community and the synagogue, but moving into the future?
What I wrote in the letter, and I don't get into internal Syrian matters, whether it's this government or the other, my late father tried to do everything for the Jewish community in Syria when he was chief rabbi of Syrian Jews in Israel. He never did anything against any Syrian government, and we're also not going to interfere in internal Syrian affairs. What we want is for everyone to live in health and peace, and that it will be good for everyone. From this point of view, I, as a rabbi, who knows whatever is going on in the world is through God's supervision, I believe that this historic process happened in the way that even the current government there seeks peace and dialogue, and that's what we expect. Like in all other countries, such as Iraq, Egypt, and Morocco, they all safeguarded the Jewish tradition, and those of other religions, be it Islam or Christianity, so we expect. We see that they really do want this, and we really hope and expect it to happen.
The Syrian community in the diaspora remains very strong. I imagine it's also very personal as well for them to help give the support to rebuild what is left of this over 2,000-year-old synagogue.
First of all, we truly want to say that from here, we lost one of the most well-known Jewish figures in Syria, Hadia Sitar. She passed away a week ago. This generation is indeed disappearing, but as you say, the Syrian Jewish community in the diaspora is very big, numbering hundreds of thousands of people. It's a very honourable community, and we're in contact with all possible figures, be they in America or Mexico, wherever they are, so we can make the best possible progress. We really expect and wish that from this moment we can come visit on the best possible side.
Also, are you, as well as Syrian expats throughout the diaspora, optimistic that the new regime will protect these priceless sites? And is there a hope of one day being in a place where people could actually go to Syria and reconnect with their roots and their great-grandparents and grandparents where they grew up?
As I said earlier, we hope the new government has its face towards peace, open to dialogue and understanding. Just as in all countries, they keep these things, the traditions. We expect and wish that with the new government, they will honour our traditions and customs. Just as we knew how to live in Syria with our Arab neighbours, and so far we are in contact with them outside of Syria. We yearn for the days that we will be able to come to see where our fathers and forefathers gave their souls to Judaism. That, with God's help, is what we expect.
I just want to add, in Arabic,
ونتأمل نحن والجالية كلها اليهودية اللي بأنحاء العالم إنه نتأمل إنه نحن نحسن ونجي نزور عن قريب جدا، وتحياتي وتقديري لكلهم، وإن شاء الله بعزات الشام بنشوف كل العالم بطريقة منيحة وطريقة تبع السلام وكله بيكون منيح.
And with God's help, everyone in the world will live in health and peace, because ultimately, and as our sages have said, there is no better blessing than peace. That is to say, every blessing in the world, be it Jewish, Muslim, or Christian, peace, that is the blessing. And if peace is the blessing, that is what we expect, and with God's help, we'll reach full redemption.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Rabbi Binyamin Hamra, Chief Rabbi of the Syrian community. Toda. Thank you all so much for joining us on Jewish World Weekly. I'm Emily Francis. We sure hope you enjoyed it. And of course, be sure to tune in again next week for a whole new episode of Jewish World Weekly. Until then, shalom from Tel Aviv.